Hello, hello, and welcome to Moments with Atmosphere Vapor. I'm Amin, and here with my colleague Shahnawaz. Hello. And today we are very happy to have Dr. Adam Gushgari with us. Adam, could you please introduce yourself and your work at ASU?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Adam Gushgari. My core expertise is in a field called wastewater surveillance. I've been operating in it for just over a decade now at this point. Um, but my passion outside of wastewater surveillance really is business. I think, especially business in the STEM fields, the environmental sciences, and engineering. And that passion brought me to ASU about a year and a half ago, working with Paul Westerhoff on the campus within the Global Center for Water Technology. My specific purview here is to assist professors and researchers with the commercialization of their early stage IP. So basically taking startup companies from conception stage up until about ready for Series A.
Oh, good. Very interesting. Let's jump into our first session
Yeah.
about atmospheric water harvesting market. How big is atmospheric water harvesting market today?
I mean that's a really interesting question. Um, I've seen a lot of different estimates around what this could be in terms of like a total addressable market or a TAM analysis. Anywhere globally from I've seen 2.5 billion to 3.5 billion. And of course that's a really large number for a really large market. Total addressable market is essentially everything and anything that could be captured with this. The reality is it could be less, but also it could be more. Um, and I think it really depends on what ancillary markets are going to be big adopters of the technology. And ultimately, that is going to be the driver of what the total addressable market for atmospheric water harvesting ultimately becomes. And I also think it's interesting. You look at like the estimated annual growth rate. They're looking at anywhere between 8 to 15% for this over the next 10 years, which arguably takes that market. If you would say it's 3 billion today, by 2035, that could be anywhere between 6 to 12 billion. So it's a really interesting space to be operating in right now, especially for an early stage startup company.
Oh, interesting. Let me have another question
Yeah.
here. Do you think atmospheric water harvesting can become a major water resource in the future?
That's really interesting. With this question, I think you have to frame it in light that historically the water market has been one of the most heavily subsidized markets globally, here in the US, but also globally, because water is ultimately one of those essential resources. um, so if the question is, do I think in 20 to 30 years there are going to be mega cities that are all drinking from the sky? I'm hesitant to say that that's actually going to be the case. But at the same time, I think that as society moves forward and water scarcity becomes, more of an apparent issue in front of us, technology advancements use more and more water, and megacities continue to grow in the fashion that they have previously. I do believe that atmospheric water harvesting, along with many other emerging technologies in the water market right now, will be ingrained within the water management of a lot of these places. I think the other thing that we have to look at is the value of decentralization of a lot of water resources, especially when you're looking at remote locations, rural towns, villages, especially those within very arid environments. Um, if the technology gets to a point where you're able to really garner a good amount of potable water with relative humidities between 5 to 8%, I think that could be a point where we really start to see a lot of adoption in heavily arid environments.
Okay, interesting. Let's let me ask another question
Yeah.
here. Which sectors do you think will adapt to AWH the fastest? Military, home, agriculture, industry, or AI industry?
I think there are two considerations here, right? The first one is, where does alignment make the most sense? So when you're developing a startup company, you're always looking for your beachhead market, right? And you're trying to develop what we call the minimum viable product, or MVP. And a lot of those things are basically, what is the path of least resistance to a market that we can generate profit in? And I think that's the same mindset that you have to approach here, is where is the low-hanging fruit? Where does integration of atmospheric water harvesting make the most sense with one of these? And I call them like ancillary markets or ancillary verticals. A vertical that may be separate but a tangent to the vertical you're trying to develop. And that could be AI. That I think is likely military. The other consideration as well, I think, is, at least if you're talking about a business to business market, what industries are generating notable free cash flow? Because FCF is arguably one of the most important aspects of a business. A healthy FCF is somewhere probably between 5 to 15%, depending on what industry you're working in. So that's basically, for every dollar you make, 15 cents of that dollar becomes free cash flow for the business. AI, specific AI companies are generating incredible FCF right now. So I read a story right now about NVIDIA that they're generating 44 cents per every dollar of free cash flow, which is wild, right? So I think that if you find the industry that aligns, that's that beachhead market, if you will, where the technology just really naturally integrates into the existing business system, and there is notable free cash flow generation within that business. You could also say probably DoD, military have a lot of free cash flow. It's not exactly the same model, but there's a lot of money in DoD. So, I think that would be the logical step as to who would be the early adopters on a large scale for this type of technology. So I think you look to AI. I think you look to DoD. Logically, those two make the most sense to me. AI is a heavy water user. They need very clean, pure water for their applications, which atmospheric water harvesting is able to generate. And then you look at, and they have a lot of free cash flow. And then you look at military, DoD, decentralization.
DOW these
The
days.
DOW. You're right. Um, but you look at how water management right now is done with our troops overseas, and it's basically a calculation of how many gallons of fuel does it take to get out this many gallons of water. And with the right technologies under the right conditions, I could see atmospheric water harvesting being a favorable alternative, especially if it provides a strategic military advantage to deployed troops.
You told about the private sectors and industry.
Yeah.
But which regions of the world will have the strongest demand for AWH in the next few years?
That's an interesting question. My gut tells me, first of all, you go where the money is, right? There's the old saying that the United States sneezes, the world catches a cold. So, the US economy, at least as it is today, is really a dominant force on the global economy. So I think that, at the end, arguably, approaching the US market makes a lot of sense. There's a very notable consumer market. So if you're developing, and I've seen some of like the countertop atmospheric water harvesting, things you can get. They look really sexy, sleek, white. It's going to get dust on it, sure, but out of the box, it looks, like a pristine product. You stick it on your counter. You look really futuristic. All your friends want it. Keep up with the Joneses. That's a dominant market here in the United States, right? The business to consumer market, we are a very consumer centric culture here in the U.S. So if that's your business model, I think logically the U.S. market is where you start. I think it's also important to look to the European market because the European market, especially in at really forward-thinking areas of environmental science and environmental technology, they tend to be on the forefront compared to the United States. You could argue California, from a municipal standpoint anyway, Cal government, Cal EPA is about 10 years ahead of the curve when it comes to the federal EPA here in the States. But the European Union tends to be a little more forward-thinking in some of these things. So I think for some specific applications, Europe is where you need to be looking. Then I think there's also the developing world, resource-constrained areas. Now the problem here is that in terms of building a business anyway, there's not a lot of free cash available in resource-constrained areas. So then you're relying on philanthropic dollars, partnering with 501c3s and nonprofit organizations. Very noble causes, don't get me wrong. But I don't know if the margins are necessarily there that are going to be able to build a strong and sustainable business that, for the long term. I could see it, though, being, a philanthropic arm of a well-established company that, made their success in one of these other markets.
Perfect, fantastic. I'll pass to Shahnawaz for next session.
Hi, Adam. Yeah, you've covered many things. I mean, it just tells you the amount of energy that you have interacting with industry, where the markets are going. So there's a lot to learn from that. So my question is on the landscape.
Sure.
So because you work with many companies, we thought like we ask you a question about how would you describe the current landscape for atmospheric water harvesting startup today? What are the challenges they're facing? What direction they're going? What are the constraints they think it's important that we overcome? If you have some idea about what they're talking about, in the landscape.
Well, I mean, I see the landscape right now as, akin to pioneers exploring the Western United States for the first time, right? This is atmospheric water harvesting. It's arguably been around for a long time, but the true attention to the market has really only emerged, I would say, over the last 5 to 10 years. And that's accelerating, and that's a really exciting place for early stage startup to be. But at the same time, those, you guys who are operating in these sort of nascent industries, nascent markets, you have a really big task ahead of you. And you're not necessarily disrupting an established industry. You are forging a path in a new industry. And arguably, that's a lot harder sometimes than trying to be a unicorn disrupting company. So a lot of the times, you are convincing somebody that they need to solve a problem that they currently don't realize they have. They might have it, but they might not realize they have it. And that's a much harder sell than selling a product that addresses a problem that they know they have and is keeping them up at night. Now, that landscape may change. And I think that change could be accelerated because, I mean, let's be realistic about what this landscape, we'll talk about the water landscape as a whole, actually looks like. We have arguably one of the fastest growing industries right now in artificial intelligence. This is heavily, 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 heavily dependent on water. Lots and lots of water used for this, technology. And it's, people are using this like wild. Like I use ChatGPT all the time. I can't imagine the amount of water I have. You know what? Hey, let's find out. Let's see. Let's see if I don't know if it'll do this. I'm going to ask ChatGPT how much water all of my ChatGPT searches, and I'm going to use water while doing this, right? So I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Let's see. How much water approximately have I used through all of my ChatGPT use? Let's just see. Okay, it shoots off this huge thing. All right, my analytics for ChatGPT is 1,700 messages recorded. but true interaction is 2 times. So my estimated total water footprint from only ChatGPT is 1,500 to 2,500 liters, which is equivalent to 10 to 16 full bathtubs. That's actually a lot less than I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
But it's still huge amount of
but it's
water.
still a huge amount of water, right? And you know, I'm one person, right? You know, there's 7 billion of us, and not everybody's using Chat GPT, but a whole lot of people are using an incredible amount of AI these days. And then you think about the industries that are also using AI, which is virtually all of them right now.
Yeah.
There are incentives for employees to get ingrain LLM, ingrain AI into their daily lives to make them more productive. So, you know, you couple this, you know, the advancement of AI that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years with water scarcity, right? This is a growing issue in the United States. And then you add on top of that all of the established water uses and water allocation that has already existed. Look at Arizona, for instance. I think it's about 75 to 80% of fresh water in the U.S. In Arizona, excuse me, is used for agricultural purposes.
Yeah.
So you have all of these. The not the Rio Grande, excuse me, that's Texas. The Lower Colorado is 100% allocated, and we have these industries that are now adding onto that burden. Something has to give. Something has to be created. Well, water has to be created. How the hell do you, excuse me, how do you create water? You have to drive innovation. This type of technology, atmospheric water harvesting, is one of the incredible innovative aspects that could change the landscape on this and set humanity up for continued growth over the next 100 to 200 years. But without this type of innovation, I believe that we're going to see a substantial decline in terms of both prosperity and population globally. And especially in developed regions. So that's kind of a really long-winded answer to your question, Sean Wallace. But the landscape, I think it's still being painted right now. And that's what's so exciting about it. That's what's exciting about being in an industry like this, where the landscape really isn't set. There are so many potential users of this technology that we might not have even conceived up until this point in time. So there's so much opportunity here. So much money to be made.
I think the statement that you made at the end, it's very, very critical and important.
Yes.
Like the room for innovation is needed. I mean, the water is a scarce community. And if we don't innovate with the population growth, we might be in a point, where water would become one of the biggest challenges, humanity would face.
I would argue we're already there.
Yeah, we're already there. Yeah, so innovation is good. So my next question is about innovation.
Oh, sure.
I mean,
you're an innovative guy. Doesn't surprise me.
Okay, thank you so much. But there's so many stuff like we are looking into, and on the atmospheric water harvesting, and sometimes we don't know which is the most critical point. We need to focus on, like the way you're saying from the industry. Like they may have an issue, but they might not know. But that would be the issue that would become the most important criteria.
Yeah.
In this matrix. So
yeah.
My question is, like, on the innovation side, people are looking at different type of materials, like
Sure.
sorbents. They are looking at like a desiccant-based system, condenser-based system. They're also looking into AI integration. There's so many different components. So if there's one area that you think is critical for us to look into it, or you think all of them are very critical that we all need to be aware of as we progress with this technology?
Look, I'm probably going to give a pretty simplistic answer to this question because you guys are, you're the researchers who are knee deep in this stuff. I'm, an outside observer on a lot of this. But my understanding right now is that one of the biggest hurdles within atmospheric water harvesting is the energy gradient, the energy delta.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And I think that addressing that is ultimately going to dictate to what scale atmospheric water harvesting is adopted and by what industries. The reason I say that, and I had a conversation recently with a colleague of mine. We were talking about, what's for a long time, like access to water was the dominant factor in whether or not your civilization would prosper. He says, is it going to continue to be that? I said, well, I mean, everybody needs water. Like, yeah, that makes logical sense to me. And his response was, it's going to be energy. It makes sense because we're already running into this issue right now, right? Even in the United States, we're a developed country. But our energy grid is not sufficient enough to really handle the current load of energy that is necessary for current society to prosper.
Yeah.
It varies from region to region, right? But you go to Texas, there are some major issues. You go to California, there are some major issues. They haven't quite made it here to Phoenix yet, but it's probably not out of the realm of possibility either.
Yeah.
So I know there's exciting developments in energy generation with photovoltaic and other renewables, and I know that Bill Gates has a project within small scale nuclear development, which is really interesting. But I don't know, how quickly will that value be realized and implemented within the communities compared to the current growing energy demand in the United States. You throw atmospheric water harvesting on top of that, especially to a large scale, which is where the industry ultimately needs to move. The energy, I think, is the part of the equation.
Yeah, I totally
that
agree.
we haven't solved, and it might be the limiting factor. So, what are the technologies around that? I mean, I think it could be anything. I think it could be any part of that machine that is generating atmospheric water, improving, but essentially decreasing the delta, decreasing the energy requirement to capture, sorb, and desorb the water. When it gets to the point that it's actually can be competing with, I think it can compete with bottled water right now, which is a good start. A lot of people drink bottled water, but I think when you get to the point that you're competing, or at least within like a single order of magnitude of municipal water, I think that is where all of a sudden you're going to see this technology catch like wildfire. And I think energy is the key to that.
Yeah, we also agree with you. Energy is a very critical, very important thing, to make this technology viable technology for many. So I have one more question about it because I know that you enjoy meeting young entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You brought so many of them in so many events that we had, before. So my question is like, when you talk to this young entrepreneur, they're coming into the atmospheric water harvesting arena,
Yeah.
what are the things they talk about? Is it like a technology challenging they're overcoming, or is it economical, financial challenging they have to overcome, or the regulatory challenging are becoming the main source of stresses for them? What are the things they think is critical for them to go forward?
Yeah, I love working with young entrepreneurs, like really green entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
They're so
Yeah.
driven. They're so dedicated. They haven't had the world beat them down yet.
Yeah.
It's great to see, the invigoration in their eyes. I think, a lot of entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs that are entering in this field got their start in the sciences, right? And I mean, that's a trend you're seeing across the board, across many different disciplines of STEM fields. These, PhD level individuals, they spent 4 years researching a technology. They have just minted their new PhD diploma. They are a subject matter expert in their field, arguably the top subject matter expert because they have the freshest knowledge. So, the technical capability of these individuals is incredibly strong.
Yeah.
The biggest worry I see from them coming into it is a worry of funding. And that's interesting because that, I think, is just a factor of them being green. Because after you've been in this space for even, 3 to 4 years, you realize that funding is always available. It's about finding the right person. There aren't, VCs standing on the corner just handing out, stacks of bills to people. But you find the right angel investor, you find the right venture capitalist firm where your product aligns with their mission, their goals, their vision of, company growth and field growth and all these things. And generally speaking, finding at least early stage seed funding, I'm talking probably in the neighborhood of like $50,000 to $250,000, is not as difficult as an early entrepreneur might think it is. The big challenge I see a lot of them run into, and as a young entrepreneur, I ran into it too. I made the cardinal mistake of developing a product without going to the market beforehand. We did amazing science. We were published in peer-reviewed literature. We even had some initial clients back when we started our first company. We developed this amazing effing science, this amazing product. And we took it to market and nobody wanted it. Ooh, that was a stick, right? Because the proper way to do this is when you're developing a new technology that you have plans for commercialization, when you bring that technology to arguably somewhere between TRL2 to TRL3, that is the point in time that you now need to be engaging with what you think the beachhead market is going to be and understanding their pain point. Because you'll never sell a damn thing unless you are solving a problem that somebody has. And that was my problem, right? So when I started my first company, we weren't really understanding what were the needs, what were, as my friend Bill Brandt likes to say, whose hair is on fire? Whose problem are you ultimately solving? We just took this technology. We had amazing science. We were amazing scientists, and we just pushed it through to commercial readiness. And we didn't fail, but we had to go back to the drawing board, and we lost a lot of time and runway for our company. So I'm always talking to new entrepreneurs about, before you get too far down this method, this development pathway, you need to go to your client, your customers. You need to go to your clients and figure out what problem are you actually solving. Ask them, what's keeping them up at night, if that's a B2C or a B2B market, and really understand, okay, here are their top 5 problems after I've talked to, somewhere between 50 to 100 people. Here are my top 5 problems. What does my product solve? And what you'll probably find is that your product, as it sits today, at hopefully TRL 2 to 3, doesn't actually solve any one of these problems. But there's one in that list that it could solve with some modifications. So then you're back to the drawing board. And that initial customer discovery process has to influence that TRL 3, 4, 5 stage development of your product. If you get too far down that TRL pathway, you're going to end up with a product that most likely nobody wants.
This is really good. I think you shared from your own experience.
Yeah.
The landscaping, just not like the technological know-how breakthrough that you're bringing in, but you need to also look at the landscape in terms of like a funding, regulatory, other stuff you need to be aware of. So
absolutely.
That you have a pretty good understanding.
I mean, you're building a business. That business has to generate revenue. That business has to generate free cash flow. Yeah. And the only way you do that is through sales of your product.
I think this is going to help a lot of young entrepreneurs.
I hope so.
What you just said.
I hope so.
Okay, I will hand in to Amin.
Thank you, Shahnawaz. Thank you, Shahnawaz. This session is vision of 2035. If you look 10 years ahead, where do you think atmospheric water harvesting will be?
Yeah. So, it's an interesting question, because I think when you look at the current landscape of how our society is moving forward in this Anthropocene, I love that word, right? There is a growing water demand. Population growth is increasing. Obviously, that inherently means more water, more food. Agriculture is one of the heaviest uses of water across the United States, ranging per state anywhere between 60 to 90% of total freshwater availability. So then you throw on growing industries like artificial intelligence that are increasing at a rate that historically we've never seen, right? Having trillion-dollar valuations of companies that were founded within the last 5 years. It's unthinkable. Even 10 years ago, this was an unfathomable idea that such a company could ever exist. And all of these industries are so terribly water heavy. Then you throw on environment, climate change, water scarcity, all these things that are impacting, even if we were at homeostasis, you're still going to see water scarcity be driving a lot of decisions moving forward. So does atmospheric water harvesting have a role to play in the future? I think the answer is maybe. At least a large scale. I think there's certainly like niche industries that it will certainly play a role in. But the question is it going to be dominant? Is it going to be a considerable, even we'll call it like 5% of total freshwater generation? That's notable. 5% of global freshwater generation is huge. So could it even get to that point? Maybe. What is it going to take though? I think the technology merits are there. I do. Obviously, there are things to overcome. The energy gradient, the energy delta to create this water. Yes, that has to be driven lower to make it economically advantageous to a lot of the current methods that we do it. I think realistically, though, that will be achieved within the next 5 to 10 years. So the question to adoption is, what are the players who are operating in this field going to be doing? The players being the businesses, the companies that are driving these forward, the researchers that are playing in this space, also people who are, running podcasts. I know you guys are researchers in the AWH space, but you're also doing this awesome advocacy. And I think that's really one of the keys is advocacy. Like I said before, you guys are, pioneers in your covered wagons, horses hitched, ready to explore the West for the very first time. That is from a technology standpoint where you currently sit, and the future is unknown. In order to solidify that, though, I think regulation has a role to play in that. So while driving your research forward, identification of low-hanging fruit in terms of market adoption is very important, I also think all of these players need to have an air of advocacy to them, not lobbying, advocacy. Advocacy meaning first of all, doing podcasts like this. The internet is a fantastic resource to be able to reach an incredible breadth of audience that you would otherwise never be able to touch. But by getting on the Hill, by talking to senators, to congressmen and women who have the ability to influence change at the highest levels of government, the federal government, you can drive forward a adoption of this technology that you otherwise might not be able to do. And I'm not sure if that's happening. I really don't. Generally, scientists, we like to stay in the lab or stay in the office. We're not generally like, getting on Capitol Hill and pounding on doors of Chuck Schumer and Ted Cruz and saying, man, you got to listen to this atmospheric water harvesting. But that's what we need to be doing. We need to be putting this technology in front of these decision makers, these change makers. They might not even know it exists. They have the influence to be able to catalyze some of that large scale adoption. And you only need one. That's the beauty of Washington. You only need one person to really become a champion for your cause, and they can create a fire which spreads and then leads to incredible adoption of a technology. That's an idea. Anyway.
Yeah, awesome idea. You already pointed out, but let's talk about breakthrough more. What breakthrough do you think can make atmospheric water harvesting more cheaper in the future?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I have a great answer for you, because again, like my understanding or my focus in this field has more so been on the business development side of things as opposed to the technological development side of things. From my layperson's understanding, I again like pointing to the energy delta, it's driving that down. I think when you're talking about the materials and I've heard like zeolite wheels, I've heard like metal organic frameworks or MOFs or TOFs, and all of these like really forward thinking innovative materials. I think it's really driving forward to like, how do you then develop a material that is going to have a greater sorption capacity in low humidity environments, And then the desorption of the water can be done at an energy gradient that is advantageous to current methods or to current ways of creating water. You know, and the other side of things is too, like there might be areas of the world that current technologies could arguably compete, but I would guess that those are really humid environments, and there's probably already a good availability of other freshwater sources in these highly humid environments. So, the golden ticket is being able to deploy these technologies and have them show incredible efficacy in regions like Arizona, in regions like Nevada, in regions like Israel and the Middle East, and these very arid environments where water scarcity is already an issue, and where they're having to employ very costly technologies already with desalinization of extremely brackish or even seawater to gain their potable water. I think those are the opportunities where perhaps the energy delta doesn't need to be as great to compete with the current status quo of freshwater generation or potable water generation.
Okay, fantastic. I have one more question in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
session about opportunity. What opportunities do you think atmospheric water harvesting will create in the future? New jobs, new industry, new technology?
I mean, new jobs is obvious. Anytime you create a new industry, you're going to create new jobs, create new opportunities, and it's not just strict jobs around companies that develop these instruments, but it's also the technicians that can service these instruments. You create basically a vertical for trade schools to be able to create programs that will train technicians to service these instruments. So I think you're going to see a lot of job creation across the board. The question is if there is any displacement of current jobs that would offset that. I don't know. It's possible. Maybe, maybe not. But I mean, there certainly will be job creation. Um, I don't know if it's necessarily going to spark new fields. I mean, although it could. I would say it would support the creation of new fields. I don't think it'll directly lead to the creation of a new field. But I think it creates the infrastructure which enables current emerging fields to flourish and creates the infrastructure and the platform for new emerging fields which may be heavily water dependent to thrive, excel, and not be limited by the resource of water. Then the question is, well, then what's the next resource they're limited by? Maybe energy. Um, so again, I keep going back to like the Pioneer example. But I mean, it's truly where AWH is at. There's really no set path as to where this is going to move because arguably this is a new paradigm. Water historically has not been the most sexy investment opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So, further opportunities. Um, it's I think that AWH could certainly support the growth of new industries, new opportunities. I don't necessarily think it would lead to the direct creation of a completely new industry, but I also think that it's one of the opportunities within the water space right now that actually poses a very interesting investment opportunity, especially right now for early stage investors where the technology, I do believe, will get to a point where it will be able to compete at least within an order of magnitude of municipal water. And when that happens, I think a lot of the investments that are being put in right now are going to pay significant dividends. So I do believe that AWH is right now a very important test case in terms of water investment. And if it is one of the ones, and not the only one, but I think it has a high opportunity of really seeing a lot of success in the investment realm. And if that is demonstrated, that brings in more dollars, and more dollars spurs more innovation and more growth. So I think that it also has the opportunity to spur a lot more innovation and, vertical development within the water sector, which I think is a really exciting opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, I pass to Shahnawaz.
I like to say that, thanks for sharing that vertical growth you
Mhm.
talked about, So it gives a lot of hope for people who are working in this industry that there's so much opportunity out there, to look into it. So this section is talks about personal insights.
Mhm.
So, we all know that you are a highly passionate person, with so much energy that you have, and
Thank
you
you.
bring energy to the room and the people who comes near you, they also get energized. So my question is like, what excites you personally the most about this atmospheric water, AWH, water harvesting? Is there something that excites you that you think this is already you talked about a few of the
Mhm.
things that excite you, but one or two points, you say, that excites you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know me, Shadwaz.
Yeah.
I love investment. I love the investment opportunity. I love making money.
Yeah.
So of course that's always exciting because I do see a lot of potential within atmospheric water harvesting as an investment opportunity. But I mean, my God, the technology is so cool. Like I've talked to a lot of people over the last year and a half about this, opportunity within various companies, corporates and other startups and just friends of mine. And the response is always like in awe, like, oh my God, they can do that? Like in Arizona, they can generate drinkable water out of our dry air. It's like, yeah, this is incredible. I oftentimes hear a relation to I don't know if we can say it on the podcast, but a very popular sci-fi movie back from the 1970s, to where this is like straight out of this movie. And I think that's what's so cool is people see it as a leap into the future, something that is arguably out of the movies, something revolutionary. I think it has a potential to address, the water scarcity issues and the climate crisis and all these different things and become an investable opportunity, which is important to me. I have two little girls and, 3 years and 6 months, and I want them to live in a world that they're able to thrive and they don't have to worry about the basic necessities of life. I want my family to have a very successful and full life, my girls to live their best life as they grow. Obviously, water availability is part of that. But I think, what excites me the most about it is how truly innovative it is and what I'm seeing it catalyze within the general population. An excitement of water. Water is something that is just taken for granted these days. You turn on a tap and it comes out. You bathe in it and you wash your clothes. And we're no longer at the point where we're walking 3 miles from a well here in the United States anyway to get enough water for your family to be able to live that specific day. We're now in this time in history where we're going to be able to see incredible technologies drive forward the future of water. And I think that's going to catalyze an incredible excitement within the general population, which then, to my point earlier, will bring more investment dollars, more research dollars, more opportunity for newer technologies that are just as innovative to also grow in this space. I think we're about to see finally water become an incredible investment opportunity.
I think, my next question was exactly what you already have covered.
Oh, okay.
My question was like, what do you think about the world needs atmospheric water harvesting now more than ever? I think you already highlighted all the stuff that is needed, like not to look at the traditional means of capturing the water, like a groundwater, surface
Mhm.
water, but your idea is like, or all of our ideas are that there's another sustainable source,
Yeah,
from the atmosphere, and how we could capture this atmospheric water for our daily needs.
absolutely. I mean, look, we're arguably in a silent crisis right now. Like, I don't think any of us would say it's silent. I mean, the alarms have been blaring for me for the last 15 years that there is a significant problem on our horizon, but I don't think the general population recognizes that. again, it's an issue of taking water for granted. It's an issue of I turn on my faucet and water comes out. But the minute that stops happening, the minute there's an issue with populations in metropolitans and megacities not being able to have water, all of a sudden the shit's going to hit the fan.
Yeah.
And this is going to go from a silent crisis to something that is on the forefront of every newspaper, every news media story. You're not going to stop hearing about it. So, my God, I don't think it's ever been more important than it is today. Maybe tomorrow.
Great. So I will hand in to Amin. You have like closing question.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. That was very interesting talking to you.
I'm glad. I've had a lot of fun, guys. This has been great.
I have one point here.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to young researchers or startups entering the AWH field?
It'd be the same advice I give any young entrepreneur or researcher looking to drive forward their career. First of all, you got to do something you're passionate about. I love building businesses. And if I wasn't passionate about that, back when I was working 80 to 90 hour weeks, week in, week out for my startup company, I would have burned out super quickly. But I loved it. I loved the technology. I loved building the business. I lived it. I breathed it. Even my poor suffering wife was, packing sample collection kits with me in an office in our Saturday afternoons. So, and God bless her. But passion is what you have to follow at the end of the day. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, get the hell out. Find something else to do, because you're just not going to be as productive or as successful if you're doing something that you are not just absolutely fascinated and enthusiastic about. Then the second thing is, again, if you're developing a company, you need to develop a product that is going to generate revenue. And in order to generate revenue, you have to solve a problem of your target customer. You cannot engage in the customer discovery process when you're building a company soon enough. Likely, you're already behind the 8 ball. So when you get your technology, once you've demonstrated basic proof of concept, conceptually, okay, it might take us, a couple years to get it there, but conceptually we know this is going to work. At that point in time, you need to be interfacing with your customer. Or again, you're going to develop a product that nobody is going to want, or more importantly, nobody is going to need. So that's specific to the entrepreneurs, but it's so important. It's so important. Know your customer, know their needs. If you do that and you have your customer then at the center of your product development, you're going to be just fine. Everything else will fall into place.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who watching us and listening to us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe our YouTube channel and stay tuned. See you in next episode.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Adam.